The Public Speaking Project presents Creating Effective Introductions by Lisa Schreiber, Ph.D., voice talent by Jill Sparborough, with Morgan Hartranft as the media production specialist. 30 seconds. There are a number of things you can accomplish in 30 seconds. In 30 seconds, you can change your profile picture on Facebook. You can watch a television commercial. You can take out the recycling. You can fill your pet's food dish. You can Google a question. You can hum the theme from Jeopardy! Twice. And according to Frank Bernieri, a psychologist from the University of Toledo, you have just 30 seconds to make a good first impression. After 30 seconds, it's all over. In a speech introduction, you are making an impression on the audience, and this impression will help your audience decide if they wish to listen to your speech or tune you out. A speech introduction is arguably the most important part of your speech because it establishes the reasons why the audience should listen to you and provides an overview of the main ideas you will present in your speech. In addition, the principle of the primacy effect tells us that the first ideas presented to an audience are more easily remembered and more influential than ideas presented later in a speech. Therefore, it is important that speakers think carefully about how to write their introduction because it has a large impact on the success of the speech. In this module, we won't be covering all the aspects of how to construct the introduction of your speech. However, you can find an entire chapter about writing introductions in our free textbook, Public Speaking, the Virtual Text, at www.publicspeakingproject.org. The purpose of this module is to help beginning speakers learn the basics about how to write effective introductions. We will focus on 5 key functions of an effective speech introduction. First, an introduction gets the audience's attention. Second, an introduction orients the audience to the speech topic. Third, the introduction shows the audience the importance of the topic. Fourth, the speaker establishes his or her credibility in the introduction. Finally, the speaker previews the main points of the speech in the introduction. Let's look at the first element of an introduction, and the very first thing that a speaker should say when she or he gets up to speak: the attention getter. An attention getter is simply a technique for getting your audience members engrossed in your speech. There are a number of different methods for getting your audience's attention. You can use a startling statement, where you attempt to shock your audience with information that they did not know before. For instance, a speaker may begin a speech on hurricanes with this fact: a hurricane is arguably the most deadly weather phenomenon that humans have to face. In the midst of a full-blown storm, strong hurricanes release more energy in 10 minutes than all of the world's nuclear weapons combined. You can tell a real or hypothetical story to get your audience's attention. In a speech about the dangers of bungee jumping, a speaker could start with this true story. According to RideAccidents.com, on December 31st, 2011, a 22-year-old Australian woman was seriously injured in a bungee jump from a bridge over the Zambezi River after the bungee cord snapped and she fell into the river 365 feet below. The woman reported that she lost consciousness upon impact, but quickly regained her senses. Despite her injuries and disorientation, she managed to avoid crocodiles as she swam through rapids with her legs still bound until she reached the shore. If you decide to tell a hypothetical story, make sure that it is based in fact. For instance, on a speech about child soldiers, you might offer this hypothetical illustration. Imagine you are 12 years old. You are outside playing with a group of your friends when suddenly the army drives into town. These soldiers attack your hometown and kill all of the adults in it. Next, they take you and the other children captive and inform you that you are about to become soldiers too. After 3 weeks of combat training, high on drugs, you are sent into another town to kill all of the adults in it. This may seem impossible to us, but there are thousands of child soldiers around the world who know this as their reality. Another attention-getting technique is to ask a question. Not only is this the easiest attention-getting technique, it is also the most common. There are 3 different types of questions you can ask. One type of question is a general question, such as, what does the color red have to do with productivity? The second type of question is an action question, where you ask the audience to participate or for a response. In his TED speech on the amazing intelligence of crows, Joshua Klein begins his presentation like this: How many of you have seen the Alfred Hitchcock film, The Birds? Any of you get really freaked out by that? You might want to leave now. The third type of question is a rhetorical question, which is a question aimed on getting the audience to think about the topic, or a question for which you and your audience members already know the answer. The question, how many of you would like to earn an easy $1,000 more per week, tax-free, is an example of a rhetorical question. In addition to questions, a speaker can also use quotations as means of getting attention. There are a number of online quotation dictionaries, such as brainyquote.com, that allow you to search for quotations by author or subject. Here are two examples. If you were giving a speech about the importance of diversity, you could begin it by saying, Kermit the Frog once said, "It's not easy being green." Or, if you were talking about learning how to fly a plane, you could start the speech in this way. According to Douglas Adams, the author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, there is an art, or rather a knack to flying. The knack lies in learning how to throw yourself at the ground and miss. Another approach to getting the audience's attention is to use suspense, where you provide information incrementally so that the audience begins to wonder what you are leading up to. Here's an example. If every person in the United States helped to pay off this bill, we would each have to pay $2,800. The sum equals about $870 billion, and it exceeds our national $693 billion credit card debt by $177 billion. The past due balance on this debt equals $85 billion, or about 10%. No, I am not talking about war, the mortgage crisis, or the federal deficit. I am talking about student loan debt. Depending on the situation, you might also refer to the audience or to the occasion to gain your audience's attention. This personalized greeting can go a long way toward generating goodwill, but just make sure it is sincere and not overdone. In 1995, Hillary Rodham Clinton used this technique in her address to the UN World Conference on Women. Thank you very much, Gertrude Mongella, for your dedicated work that has brought us to this point, distinguished delegates and guests. I would like to thank the Secretary General for inviting me to be part of this important United Nations Fourth World Conference on Women. This is truly a celebration of the contributions women make in every aspect of life, in the home, on the job, in the community, as mothers, wives, sisters, daughters, learners, workers, citizens, and leaders. The final attention-getting technique that can be used by speakers is humor. Humor can lighten the mood and establish common ground with an audience. However, speakers should be very, very careful when deciding to tell a joke to start their speech. First of all, if you don't tell jokes well to your friends, you should not try to tell one to an audience. Second, your joke should be directly linked to your topic. Third, your joke should not be offensive or off-color in the least. And finally, according to Rob Cottingham, certain jokes don't work very well in speeches, including sarcasm, jokes that require long, complex setups, and puns. On his website, he provides an example of the effective use of humor in a speech by Nelson Mandela, who began his address at the Live Aid concert for poverty by saying, "As you know, I recently formally announced my retirement from public life and should really not be here." So you have seen some of the ways to get your audience's attention, but this isn't enough to prepare your audience for your speech. You need to keep your audience's attention by orienting the audience to the topic, explaining why the topic is important, and establishing your credibility. While the attention getter of your introduction always goes first, the next three techniques can go in any order. Let's look at each of these three orientation devices, starting with orienting your audience to your topic. Sometimes we give speeches on topics that are familiar to the audience, like Italian food, cell phones, and national holidays. However, occasionally our topics are obscure and unfamiliar to the audience and need to be put into context so the audience can understand it. You can establish a context for your topic by linking it to something the audience is familiar with. For instance, you can locate your topic in space. You can compare it to a familiar structure or object. You can use an analogy to describe your topic. You can define new terms, or you can locate the topic in the context of historic events. So, an example of orienting your topic spatially would sound like this. Many of you have heard of the habit of hoarding or even seen the TV show on A&E. What you may not know is that this condition is sometimes caused by brain damage. A 2003 study conducted by University of Iowa neuroscientists found that damage to the right medial prefrontal cortex tends to cause hoarding. This area of your brain is located roughly right behind your right eyebrow. Or you could compare an unfamiliar structure to a familiar structure. Sea anemones are animals that resemble the trees in our yard. Their bodies are trunk-like, and their tentacles become full and bushy as they age, just as the branches of a mature tree fill out. You might use an analogy to put the topic into context. If you could magnify an apple to the size of the Earth, the atoms in the original apple would each be about the size of an apple. You can provide a definition of terms that may not be familiar to the audience. Anthophobia is the fear of flowers, and stems from the Greek terms antho, meaning flower, and phobia, meaning fear. Finally, you may want to contextualize your topic by locating it in history. In 1965, a gallon of gasoline was 31 cents, a loaf of bread was 21 cents, and the average price for a new car was $2,650. In 1965, the Watts race riots broke out in Los Angeles. The Pope visited the United States for the first time, and we sent more troops to Vietnam. People went to the theater to watch the movie The Sound of Music and listen to the album Help by the Beatles. In 1965 was also the year that Congress created Medicare, at a time when only half of older adults in the U.S. had access to health insurance.